Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
Welcome to Launch Code. I am Logan Stark, your host for this episode, and I am joined with the ever-talented Marty Skovlund Jr. JR, here we go.
Yep, shout out to Dad.
Former Army Ranger, TV host, author, writer, and currently the editor-in-chief of Coffee or Die magazine, Black Rifle Coffee.
Yes, sir. Thanks
Welcome.
for having me on.
Thank you for being here. It's nice to have you in Texas.
I like being in Texas. Texas is a cool place. I wouldn't mind if they turned the thermometer down a little bit, but other than that.
Marty lives in the Northeast, and he comes down here every once in a while to Texas, and we have the opportunity to collab on a few different things and work through a couple different things. And right now, what you're kind of, would you say you're wearing the writer hat more these days, or would you say it's in general storytelling, video guy? You're kind of doing a whole bunch of stuff
I think
right
we
now.
try to, I think the most appropriate label for what, not just what I do, but I think what a lot of us do here is multimedia storyteller, to where we're trying to, specifically with the stories on Coffee or Die, it's like, yeah, we want to write a great story. We want it to have great photography to go with it. If it's possible, we want to have some sort of a video component to that. And lately that's been taking the shape of the Coffee or Die episodes. And, we're about to launch a companion podcast. And so we're kind of hitting all the different senses there, I think, in what we're trying to do.
Yeah, in which, if you're not doing that these days, you're going to be behind the curve. Like, you have to be a Swiss Army knife, and you have to be able to do all this stuff.
I compare it to, like, how when you're told growing up, or like something they've discovered in education is like kids learn differently. Some kids are right brain, left brain, whatever. I think one of the things with like storytelling these days, if you're in this line of work, you have to recognize that people consume stories differently. They might all be interested in the same story, but some people want to watch it, some people want to read it, some people want to listen to it.
Yeah, and then, just I'm curious myself to hear it from you. Would you say that people are reading less? Are written articles irrelevant at this point? Or like, how do you view that person and that audience? Because I mean, like, podcasts are so amazing. I think we're at like 20% of Americans consume podcasts on a regular basis. Would you say it's about the same for people who are still reading articles and consuming knowledge that way?
Yeah, I think, for podcasts, I think, we had that dip in radio for a while there. And I think podcasts have now replaced radio in a lot of ways, to where people still like to listen like they did with radio back then. It's just podcasts now. When it comes to the written word, I think people, I don't know the statistics. I've seen them before, but I wouldn't feel comfortable quoting them right now. But people are still reading. A lot of people are reading. I think the bar for what people will read is higher. I think there's so many talented people out there right now. So many people. Everybody's got a laptop now. Everybody's got a way to write. That wasn't the case not so long ago. If you didn't have a typewriter, or you didn't have, if you go back even further, if you didn't have access to a printing press, it didn't matter if you were a good writer or not. You weren't getting your shit out there. But now it's like anybody can start a blog. Anybody can self-publish a book. Like, anybody can get their writing out there. And so I think that with more competition comes a higher level of product to rise to the top, or to catch people's attention. And you just have to be really, really good. You have to be on top of your shit. And to be successful as a writer, you have to be able to separate yourself from the rest of the crowd.
You have to separate yourself from the rest of the crowd. You have to make sure that your thing is being seen, and specifically you are an interesting case because it's not like you're a writer for a publishing company that you have a social media page with a huge following that your articles are going to get kicked out to, and you don't really have to worry about that. So you run all of the social media in conjunction with making sure that you're writing and telling these good stories. So you really have to be in the know on that side of the house as well. Which adds another layer of complexity to things. And
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the fun things about what we're doing with Coffee or Die right now within Black Rifle is we are kind of starting like this new wing within Black Rifle, this new media entity within a already very heavy hitter, in the media space. Black Rifle's a fucking heavy hitter. And so with us starting Coffee or Die, it's kind of like, we're starting new social media pages with those, and we have to kind of, build those up from scratch. And we've got Black Rifle, the larger organization, to help give us a little bit of a boost there, but you're still creating from scratch. And we're creating from scratch in a time when all the main social media platforms have really ratcheted down on growth for pages. Like, it's not like it was a couple of years ago when it was like, man, you could start a page, like when Jared and Matt and those guys were really getting going, it was like a free-for-all with being able to grow something. Not that it was easy, you still had to know what you were doing, but now it's like,
the parking space was 100% free back then.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to have as much knowledge as you do now, specifically with Facebook, in order to get views. Like, it was much more like you knew if the variables that you needed to be 100% sure of that something would be successful were far less than they are today.
And, you even look at just like Black Rifle proper on the YouTube page, we're only at like 180,000, 185,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah, only.
And well, no, I'm just saying, like, you look at like Black Rifle, again, heavy hitter. Like, we put out great stuff as a company. And there's a lot of other pages out there that, like, if you started a little bit earlier than Black Rifle did, their subscriber counts are a lot higher, just because they were getting going in that time when it was a little bit more quick to grow.
Right.
So
tell me about specifically origins of Coffee or Die, and how that came to be, because you've known Matt Best and Jared Taylor and Evan Hafer. You've known them for quite a while, but when this came to be, and that's what I think it's important that people know around here, is like, yes, we're all friends, but there's also, it's like being friends with one of your officers, you know what I mean? Like, you're professional during the day, like, yeah, you go smoke and joke and drink beers later on, but like the formality that we have between us when it becomes to being a professional and being a business is very much there, and everybody is held to very high standards by everybody else in the core group. So how did that come to be? Where were we at in life? And then speak a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right when it comes to the way people conduct themselves, and like, especially since I've come on to the company in a more formal fashion now, being like an actual employee, it's like, it doesn't really matter how long I've known any of them. Like, they're the boss now. They don't really act like the boss in a traditional sense, but they know it, I know it. We all know we're here to get something done together. We all want to collectively move forward, I think. But it's not something where it's just like, oh, you're cool, I'm cool, we're all cool, and we're just gonna fucking bro out all. No, it's like, there's shit to be done. Anybody that's ever been around, the core group at Black Rifle outside of social events, like, knows they work their asses off, And if you come onto this team like I did, this spring, I know that coming into it too, like, okay, time to come in here and prove myself. It doesn't matter if I've known them a while. Now it only matters what I can do today and what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Right.
And so the way that came about, though, to get more specific on
well,
that.
Before you get into that real quick, I want to hear it from your mouth. Like, define Coffee or Die.
Oh, yeah. So Coffee or Die is a lifestyle magazine in its most simple form. We do it completely online. It's a once-a-month issue that we've moved into, to where we're putting out about 15 to 25 original stories every month from a team of 11 writers and a couple more people that kind of rotate in and out. And we don't do any op-eds. It's no opinion stuff. We don't do breaking news. It's all like human interest stories. We're trying to find interesting people, interesting places, things that are going on that people would want to know about. And that's what we're trying to do at Coffee or Die. And that's regardless of the written content, the video content, any of that. It's find stories that are interesting and deserve to be told.
Right. And how did it come to be?
Yeah, so I'd been doing some blog stuff for Black Rifle for a while. You and I were working on that for, I don't even know how long. It was it kind of seemed like an off and on thing, depending on other stuff that I had going on. And the way Black Rifle was going. And it got to be, I went about a year ago, it was about last fall, I embedded in Afghanistan for Task and Purpose. Came back from that and, talked to Evan, and he was looking at doing some different moves within the media space. And this was at the time that Black Rifle, I don't think it's a secret, they put out a press release. Black Rifle brought on an investment firm to help grow the company. And so I think they were looking at different ways to expand. And me and Evan talked about some stuff. He put me on an initial contract to build out one idea, and I came out to Texas it was right after you guys had moved to San Antonio in March or April, I think it was around that time. And I came out to kind of talk about that, and it was like, well, we're not really going to go in that direction anymore, but what do you think about running the blog? And at the time I kind of felt like, I've done a lot of stuff, and I've been escalating my profession. Like, I feel like doing and running just like a simple blog format would have been either stagnating or even moving backwards for me professionally. And so I kind of countered with, well, I mean, totally down with that idea, but why don't we up the ante on that? Why don't we try to do something a little bit more professional that's of the same premium nature that you guys are moving with your video content and the other stuff? Like Black Rifle produces premium coffee, roast to order, like small batch. Why don't we do the same thing with all of our content? Why, we're putting out great videos, right? Great production value, great storytelling. Why would we phone it in on the written stuff, right? And that was my pitch. And so we looked at like, okay, let's do something called a magazine. There was a couple of different names in the beginning there, but we ended up settling on Coffee or Die Magazine. And so far it's, so far so good. We kicked it off right off the bat, like literally 2 weeks after I signed my contract here. I was on my way back over to Afghanistan for another embed to kick things off with Coffee or Die. And then it's been just off to the races ever since then.
Yep. Off to the races is a gross understatement, I would say. Marty, within it was already in the works, but the first thing you did after this whole thing got approved and you came on was you went to Afghanistan and you didn't just like go hang out in Kabul. Like, you went out into the mountains, and I think. Specifically this article, Valley Boys, it's one, like, I've read it a number of times. It's incredibly well written, and the whole story behind this and what all came out of it in the form of media is really interesting. I want to read a little excerpt here to just kind of, This is like probably one of my favorite articles. I think it just speaks not only to our generation of vets, but it kind of wraps this whole thing up pretty well. They still fit in the common tropes associated with SF though: beards, longish hair, and relaxed attitudes, along with a few sleeve tattoos sprinkled in for good measure. Although they sport ball caps and Glocks in lieu of cowboy hats and six-shooters, they are frontiersmen all the same, charged with taming the Momon Valley. So just like line this up in how this came to be and the process you had to go through to get into Afghanistan.
Yeah, so it was, it's definitely not something that happens overnight. It's not something that you can just call up Resolute support and be like, hey, I'm a bro with a camera and a laptop. Like, let's do this. Like that it doesn't, it was a long time of, years of building a portfolio, showing that, yeah, like the fact that I'm, was in the Army, like that'll get your foot in the door to a certain degree. Like they'll read your email or take your call because of that, basically. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, that's as far as you get, because when those people that are kind of the gatekeepers for this have to go brief a 2-star, a 3 or a 4-star general on like, hey, we're going to bring this guy into this country and be responsible for him and pay for his, all these different things. Like, it needs to be worth their time and know that it's going to be a high rate, a high percentage of success, right? So it was years of just kind of building up that portfolio, building and nurturing relationships, and it finally got to a point, like I said, with Task and Purpose. I went over there, and I think, I didn't know it at the time, but I think in retrospect, it was a little bit of them testing me out to see, like, let's start him off with some of the more limited access stuff, right? See how he does, see what he puts out. And I went over there and I fucking worked my ass off, dude. Like I put out, I think it was something like 10 stories over that amount of time. A massive long form one that was like 7,000 words. That was a huge like policy look at like what exactly is going on in Afghanistan. We put out multiple videos. I took hundreds of fully edited stills, like after everything. Like I worked my ass off over there, and I think they came out of that saying like, wow, a lot of people saw this stuff. The stuff that he did is impressing people at high levels, because this gets put into their like daily update briefs, and it gets read throughout the professional military. And it was impressing people, and it apparently impressed the 2-star in charge of all special operations in Afghanistan at the time, which was what led to that second trip back where I got more access. I got to go out to the special forces camp. I got to go into combat with those guys.
Now, when you say did a 2-star reach out to you?
It was... no, it wasn't, but I think I got his attention. And I think when it came time to, look at other media stuff, I think I was a guy that, I had already been asking to come back. And I think that helped my name get to the front of the list, maybe. I don't know the internal workings back there as far as their internal deliberations, but I do know that what I did on that first embed weighed heavily on not only getting the second embed, but what I was allowed to do on that second embed. And that's beyond just like, like the cool, like being able to do this article with this team. I wasn't the first journalist to go out to this particular camp, but I was the only one that they brought out on a mission that they knew they were going to get into a fight. And that wasn't Resolute support.
And
that
why
wasn't
would you say that is? Was it your background more than anything?
I think that gets you in the door. But if you go out there, you can say, I was in the Army or whatever all day long before this. But like, if you're out there and you're a douchebag, then like,
it's just JR being JR. People want him around.
Yeah.
They want that big teddy bear. They want him around.
Yeah. So I think I was able to go out there and like, be one of the boys, because I am one of the, like, I am like, I know these guys even though I didn't know them, if that makes sense. Right. And I'm not this like elitist douchebag that comes in and acts like he's holier than thou and all this other stuff. Like, I'm eating MREs. They've only got one hot meal a day, and that's either warming up a little mini pepperoni thing or a corn dog. And I'm not eating any of those hot meals because, like, dude, I'm a guest out here for 2 weeks. I'll eat the MRE three times a day.
Right.
And I think that little stuff like that speaks volumes.
Yeah, and then I would have to imagine the means and delivery in which you go out to do these things. So traditionally, when a journalist goes to do a story, they're there to take notes and to write, and then sometimes there's either a photographer with them or a crew of people to get the other media. You went to Afghanistan by yourself to get everything. You're writing these articles, you're taking your own stills, you're doing your own videography work, and I got to imagine that aids in the fact that, like, it's easy to take in Marty as opposed to like you plus unknown variables in the form of other media captures.
And you're taking up more seats in the helicopter. Right. You're taking up more meals at the chow hall. Like, the more people that you bring with you, the more of a burden it is on that organization. And for me, I'm a very small footprint when I come into that country, or go to embed with the military force. It's a small footprint. And I also know how to not get in the way because I know what they're doing. Like, it's not a mystery to me what they're doing at any given part of the day because I've done it. So I know how to stay out of their way and be as unobtrusive as I possibly can be, while still doing my job, of course. Mm-hmm. But also, too, they don't have to worry about me misinterpreting stuff that they say or do. And that's a big piece, because if you don't have that military background or don't know that culture, it's easy to take something out of context and think that maybe something more nefarious is happening. Whereas when they are using acronyms around me, like, it's almost, a lot of people talk about this, like, how we talk in the military is almost like a different language. I'm bilingual, whereas a lot of journalists are not.
Right.
And so they don't have to worry about me missing things. That also works to my advantage because they can't hide shit for me either. But
right. So you get to Afghanistan and you end up near the Pakistani border at a very remote combat outpost. When and how do you start compiling the story? Kind of walk me through the process as far as like you got boots on the ground. Walk me through how you did it and whether or not like you're mentally thinking about this checklist in your head.
And that's going into something like this, like, okay, I know that I'm gonna need to get at least one feature long form story out of this. And you start to think about like, okay, what does that story look like? What does the narrative arc of that story look like? I know there's certain pieces that need to be there in order to move this thing along. And, you've got to have some sort of a climax there. You've got to get that attention grabber in the beginning. Like, there's just certain pieces that you need to get. And you also, the thing that separates, I think, the great stories from the good stories is they get those little details, those little quirky moments. Kind of like, in the article when the guys are on the way to go check out the ID and they're arguing about listening to what kind of music they're listening to. And like, it's just like little stuff like that just humanizes the whole thing.
Right.
And so as you're going through that, you kind of have this loose structure in your head of like, okay, these are the things that I know I need to hit. I need to be looking for to plug. And so every night when I came back, or every other night, it ended up actually probably being just because you're busy running around and all this other stuff. But I would try to sit down and just write out my thoughts, write out some of the conversations that I heard so that I wouldn't forget the conversations. Because it's not like I'm walking around with a Zoom recorder all the time, but there's like conversations that would just organically happen that it would be super awkward if I were to go and hurry and grab my camera.
Right. That
I just have to like keep up there and then go later that night, sit down and write those things down.
Yeah. And what are your, let's call them the tools of the storyteller for you on this trip? Like, what devices did you have and using and yada yada to help you do your job over there?
Yeah, and this plays into the fact like, look, I don't have a crew coming with me. Like I don't have, like, so I have to carry all this stuff myself. Which
is interesting because it's like what you provided, like the part one of the video that we made about this trip for Afghanistan, like it already has close to 1 million views combined across social platforms. By the time this episode airs, part 2 will already be out, which is superbly better than the first one. So it goes to show you don't need that stuff. And you proved that. The proof is in the pudding. And so I think it's interesting to like see like you're pretty bare bones.
Yeah, you have to be. Like I said, I have to carry my own stuff. Like like when you fly into Hamid Karzai International Airport, like to get to because of all these rings of security, you have to like walk to where you can get a cab. And it's like, I'm doing the duffel bag drag, like myself, like I can't bring tough boxes full of equipment with me and all this other stuff. And I need to know that what I do bring with me is going to perform and be able to do what I need to do. And so to get into the specifics of that, especially for the people who are looking at this stuff, I take a Sony A9 camera with me, which is a full frame mirrorless camera. For this particular trip, I took a 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8 lens, which was the primary lens I use on just about everything out there. I had a 70 to 300 with me as well that I didn't use as much, but I just had there just in case. And I had a fixed 35 millimeter f2.8 as well as just kind of a backup lens, or if I needed something that was more low profile, something smaller than that bigger 24 to 70. So that was the camera. I use a Rode mic on top of that. I brought a Gorilla Pod with me. I've got a camera strap that I used as well for a lot of stuff. And as far as, you bring a laptop with you, you bring 2 external hard drives, you have to do a data dump every single night to make sure that you're not risking anything.
GoPro, right?
Yep. We brought 2 GoPros, and we only used those on a few different, only when it was really applicable.
Right.
But had 2 of those along with us, and then a laptop, because again, I needed to be writing and all that sort of stuff. And then of course, when you go to a place like Afghanistan, the bulk of your kit, because a lot of times when I travel for stories now, I can fit everything into one backpack and one like satchel thing that I've got. But when you go to Afghanistan, you have to bring you have to bring a helmet, you have to bring a plate carrier, you have to bring, eyes, ears, hands, all the stuff that you would carry even when you were in the military to go on a mission, because you're still doing the same thing. The only thing you're not carrying with you is ammo and a weapon. So Yeah, that's all the stuff that I would use, and I would,
The audio recording, anything? Did you just use your phone or
just the Rode mic.
Yeah. Well, specifically like when you're interviewing for written articles.
Yeah, so now I have a Zoom recorder. I didn't have that then. I used to just rely on my phone because it was, again, it's no need to duplicate equipment, and a phone records fine. I learned a lesson on my first deployment, or not my first deployment, my first embed when I was over there with Task and Purpose. I went to go interview a one-star general, and they're like, okay, what's your recording equipment? Because I'm going into a secure area. And I was like, I'll be recording on my phone. They're like, you can't bring a phone in there. I'm like, okay, I'm going to grab my camera and I'll, I'll keep the lens cap on and we'll just record audio that way. They're like, you can't bring a camera in there, even if it's got a lens cap on. And I'm like, okay, like would have been nice to know this. So like, do you have a Zoom with you? And I'm like, no, because I didn't think I needed one.
Right.
It was one of those things you don't know until.
Which a Zoom is just like this kind of boxy audio recorder.
Yeah.
Pretty common in the.
Yeah. And so what you have to do in a situation like that, it's like, what are you going to do? Just say, I can't do the interview. No, you fucking roll with it. And hey, old school.
Notes really friggin' fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Try to. And a lot of good journalists, they develop shorthand for doing that. And I haven't really done that yet because I haven't been in a situation where I really needed to do that a lot, because I'm usually just recording stuff. It's more accurate anyway, right? You're not going to fuck up a quote. But I kind of figured out then, it's like, nope, like you need to have that in your toolbox.
Yeah.
And I'm still, even today, if I much prefer to just record a conversation, because then it's a more organic conversation. There's not those pauses while I'm scribbling stuff down. I'm able to make eye contact. A lot of what you do as a journalist is like, you have to make people comfortable enough to talk to you and talk to you openly, and not be so guarded, especially military types who are already like, this is a fucking journalist.
Right,
like,
right.
I saw what happened to General McChrystal. It's not going to happen to me, So, so that's, you have to be cognizant of that. And I start something like, when I'm doing interviews with military guys, that's where I really rely on my military background to like, that one star was an Air Force guy, and he was a former CAS pilot, a close air support pilot. And I was like, yeah, dude, I fucking benefited from your services a time or two.
Yeah.
And,
I hear you say that, and it's like, damn, how important are first impressions when you're doing what you do? You're like, how long did you have with that one star to sit down and interview him?
30 minutes.
That's it,
and I
right?
had a fire team of public affairs people all sitting there monitoring us, like right there in a room. I mean,
yeah, if you fuck that up in the first 5 minutes, like you get nothing.
And that's at the beginning of the embed.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's your access can be turned off for anything, because they're essentially doing you a favor by letting you be there. I mean, technically they need to allow media and stuff in, but the thing is they can, they've only got so many slots, which means they can be picky with who they let in and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna act like an asshole, then you're probably not going to be, your embed request might get lost in the shuffle next time.
Yeah. It goes about to have your wits about you, and specifically that brings me to when you were in Afghanistan, it wasn't a poofy embed. Like, it got hairy.
Yeah, and it wasn't so, like, look, I was never in a situation in all this where I feared for my life. I think maybe...
Would civilians be able to say the same thing, though?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But only because, like, I can understand the difference between when things are bad and when they're not. And, people who've never been in that situation maybe imagine things are worse than what they actually are,
right.
Or get wrapped up in the what ifs. Like, you can play the what if game all day long. I don't got enough brain cells to do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so you just kind of worry about the stuff that's realistically going on around you and stuff. And to me, it was like, hey, that ridge we walked up on during the mission that I went out with them on, like literally ISIS all over. I since found out I actually called one of the guys, one of the Air Force combat controllers that was on that mission dropping the bombs. He's out of the Air Force now. And I called him, we're working on this video and, for part 2, and I needed his help on locating this valley that we went to. And I know he's like, yeah, did you hear, like, the guys that replaced me, I heard from the other day, like they went in there and they actually cleared the rest of it out of all the ISIS guys. It was something like 72 people killed. 72 ISIS fighters
Right
killed.
after you got out of there?
This was in the months following.
Really?
And they went up there multiple times after me, again and again, trying to get this place, get it pushed out and everything. One of the guys on their team got shot in the foot. So it's like, it was a hairy place. It was, again, they killed 70 people. So that means there probably was at least 80 to 100 ISIS fighters in this valley that we went up into. And, the place is like littered with mines, and we had to have the Afghan anti-mine folks cleared ahead of us. And you're still kind of like, we got that on the video where one of the SF soldiers turned around and was like, hey dude, just stick to the rocks in this part because the soft ground might have some nasty surprises. So
kind of.
And I'm just sitting there thinking like, oh, this is fucking great for video. Like,
yeah.
I'm not even thinking about like I might get blown up.
Well, before I get into the specifics, well, like, kind of paint the picture for, what was the mission you were on, and how many guys were you with? Yada yada.
So the mission was, they called it an SNO mission, which stands for Surveillance and Observation. And I know you as a former scout sniper, that's like your bread and butter, I imagine.
Yeah.
And that being said, they knew going into it, like, hey, this is a nasty place. We're going to take fire. They're going to know we're here. It's not a sneaky SNO. It's more of a, let's go up there and see what we're looking at for future operations into the valley and really see what, get eyes on.
So that was 100% when you guys left the wire, you're like, we're going to get shot at.
Yep. I think the team sergeant, we call him, his pseudonym in the article is Cotton. I asked him, I was like, so what are the odds of, us taking contact on the mission, getting stuff for the article? And he was like, it's probably going to get pretty spicy. That cracked me up because he's like just super nonchalant. Well, it'll probably get pretty spicy.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, all right, and, you definitely, it was cool for me just to like going through the process of like, they're all checking their weapon stuff. I'm like, all right, got the, I got a UV filter on here. I've got an extra lens in my back pocket. Got that 35 fixed in my pocket. Like, all right, all the GoPro batteries are charged up if I just, because I'm going to have to switch. And, like I'm going through my checks and like kind of felt good to like
get back in that mindset.
Like knowing like, okay, we're going to go out and do the thing, And, but it was never like, of course it crosses your mind, especially now, like, I'm married and I have a kid. Like, it's not just me that I'm worried about at this point. And of course it comes across like, yeah, that would suck if something did happen, but I wasn't overly worried about it either,
So you guys, you took vehicles to a certain point and then you got out to do a movement on foot up to your observation point.
Yeah. We climbed a fucking straight up ridgeline. I mean, straight up to the point where if you turned around to look where you were coming from, you'd probably get a little bit dizzy. Like, it was a steep climb. There were parts like I didn't know how we were going to get back down, and it was pretty like we all fell multiple times on the way back down, like, and slid on our butts because like it was super steep. And so that climb up was just a kick in the balls as far as getting up there. But yeah, we took vehicles as far as we could get because it was like not the valley next door to the Momon Valley where they were at, but the valley next to that one. So it's about probably like 2 miles away. But that takes a long ways to drive in this terrain. And, so yeah, we drove up to the furthest we could get. The local Afghan militia leader that they had talked to a few days prior, he took his guys in on foot into the valley because they're just all about killing ISIS. Like, they fucking hate those guys. So they went on foot. We climbed high. And as soon as we got up there, it was within 5 minutes of getting up on top of the ridgeline because there's no cover up there. There's no concealment. You're completely exposed. And I remember coming up to Cotton and being like, so what do you think? Getting a little bit for the video. And he was like, yeah, man, I don't know. He's like, I kind of thought we'd just start getting shot at as soon as we came up here, but maybe this isn't as bad as we thought it was. And it wasn't literally like...
So you were at your observation spot for a while before anything happened?
2-3 minutes, 5 minutes at the most.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying is we got up there and I went up to him like, hey, so what are you thinking? Like, he's like,
okay.
He's kind of like, yeah, I thought we would get shot at like right away as soon as we came up here. And this was literally as soon as we got up there. It was within 5 minutes that stuff started kicking off.
Yeah. So ISIS-K, which...
ISIS of the Khorasan.
Okay.
It's where they're trying to establish a new caliphate after getting their asses kicked in Iraq and Syria.
I'm curious, how is that interaction? You've got American forces that are still have a presence there. You have ISIS-K, and then I'm assuming the Taliban has to still be there. How is that triangle?
That militia leader that they were working with, he was a former Taliban commander. And I think he's just an ALP, Afghan local police, they call him ALP, commander, as long as ISIS is there, and probably as soon as ISIS is gone, probably going back to his former title.
Yeah, so it's... It is.
It's kind of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of situation to a certain degree.
And you did a deployment to Afghanistan when you were in the Army, correct? 2,
yeah. I did 3 to Iraq and 2 to Afghanistan.
And how do you view that as a journalist and a soldier in the sense of how that's kind of transpired and from a perspective like. The way that the last 17 years of war have unfolded, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's something like nobody ever saw this coming.
I don't think we've ever been interested in ending the war either, though. We did this massive drawdown in 2013 after we did this massive surge. And, there's never, the way I look at it is, and I would have never said this when I was in because I enjoyed deploying when I was in, I liked my job, but that being said, with the maturity and the years under my belt now to, look back, I think that our fight was never really with the Taliban. Our fight was with Al-Qaeda, and we just wanted to fuck the Taliban up because they harbored Al-Qaeda, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was kind of a foolhardy thing to go in and say that we're going to go in and dismantle the Taliban.
Yeah, I think more than anything...
Because the Taliban is not just fighters. The Taliban is farmers. The Taliban is...
Right. We as Americans, we want to define and label stuff really bad. And though it's because it's easy to say the enemy is the Taliban.
Yep.
When the truth and the actuality of what's going on is so much more complicated.
Yes.
And it's so the guy that comes from Eastern Europe down to Afghanistan to fight us, technically is he Taliban or, does it even fucking matter what we call him? You know what I mean? And it's more of just
I think we honestly could have, and I don't want to act like I'm sure there's smarter people than me who have analyzed this ad nauseum, but from my position, and I think that maybe we probably didn't have much to do there past 2002, 2003. Of course, we didn't have bin Laden dead at that point yet. So I think you leave probably behind a very small counterterrorism footprint there. And you're not really trying to fuck with the Taliban too much. You tell them hey, we catch you. Hey, if you're in the same house as some Al-Qaeda folks we're going after, you're going to get smoked just like them. Sure. But I don't think you're necessarily trying to do nation building there in a place that is...
It's such a conundrum.
This isn't the Berlin airlift we're talking about here. This isn't the Marshall Plan.
It is one of the most complex problems probably ever.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do a series of podcasts on Afghanistan alone.
For sure.
And maybe that's something interesting we should think about, Marty. But it's super complicated. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I want to stay with your story and what transpired. But when I have such respect for what you're doing, and it was so fun to get your footage back and see your process. But you got to go watch this video. It's Embedded with Special Forces Part 2. All in, you're looking at 30 minutes watching these 2 videos from Marty's trip over there, and I had the interesting perspective to see everything that you got, and also we'll get into the process that we're going through right now to come to the final cut and yada yada, but you're in the middle of this firefight. You guys are having snaps, and from the audio it doesn't sound like they're buzzing next to your ears, but it is. You are taking fire. And specifically there's this shot where one of the ODA guys is laying down suppression with the saw, and I'm looking at all this stuff that you got back, and I'm like, Marty's got stills, he's got slow-mo, and he's got real-time footage, which as a fellow videographer, I'm looking at all this stuff. I'm like, so you had the audacity in the middle of this firefight to like stay super grounded to what your purpose was and to think on your feet and like get all these different types of stuff. And like, did you feel like super zen and kind of in like super in the flow state when all this stuff was going on? Because on the end of it, on the finished product end of it, it's like you couldn't have possibly got anything else.
Yeah, no, I think I got everything that I could have possibly got out of that. As far as my own like self-critique on things, I'm pretty happy with what I pulled out of that for that firefight at least. I probably could have done more on back at the camp and stuff, but you're very limited on what you can show because it's a remote special forces camp. Like this isn't a Hollywood set. Like this is real life, and you have to be careful with what you show. But that being said, there's some other stuff I would have got. But as far as that mission goes, that firefight goes, I was pretty happy with what I came away with. I wish I would have moved positions one more time, but I was trying to minimize how much I was moving just because I didn't want to get in their way. And two, I wanted to reduce the risk of myself, getting hurt or something like that. Because now Marty's a big fucking dude. Like for people who haven't met me in real life, I'm, just shy of 6'5" and, hovering around 270, give or take, and you throw all the body armor and stuff on me. That's a big boy to haul down off a pretty steep mountain. I didn't want to put those guys in that situation.
Right.
So I tried to minimize my movements. That being said, I wish I would have moved one more time than I did, because there were some guys that were popping off with the 320, sending 40 millimeter grenades down. And I wish I would have got that. But other than that, though, yeah, I'm pretty happy with what I came out of there with. And it is, look, my job is there. They gave up a seat. They gave up a seat that they could have had somebody else with a rifle that could have fired back. They gave that seat up to let me come with. Somebody that's not able to contribute in any meaningful way to the fight at hand, that they knew they were going to get into. They knew they were getting into a fight. They still chose to bring me with, which is pretty awesome.
It says a lot. It for sure does.
And so my thing is like, okay, that would be a real dick move on my part to take that spot and go up there with those guys and not do my job and do it well. You know what I mean? These guys are all there right now because they are the best in the world at what they do. These guys are Green Berets. They're special forces. They're on top of that, they're a dive team, which means that there's a whole nother level of selection. These guys are the tip of the spear, right? And for me, it's like, you know what? Like, I'm not saying I'm Spielberg or anything, but I better be performing at a high level at what my job is there to do. You know?
Yeah, and consequences are about as dire as they can get. Like, you fuck up, either like you're putting these men at risk, or you're getting seriously injured. Mm-hmm. Or death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's where I think that background of just knowing the tactical environment, what that looks like, and just simple things that probably seem like common sense, but they would worry about probably with other people is like, okay, if we bring Marty with, we know he's not going to run in front of our rifles because Marty knows what comes out the end of a rifle. Like, it sounds oversimplified to say that, but we've probably all been around people that are unfamiliar with those situations. And
yeah, and there's this other scene. Looking back at what you produced with these videos, there's actually a part that's way more tense and dramatic to me, because the area that I was in Afghanistan, the biggest issue was IEDs. It was the area we were in the Helmand Valley or Helmand Province was. It was known as a breeding ground for IEDs. So, I have this like tense fear built up regarding those things because they were so prevalent. I've seen them in so many different ways in so many different places, and I've seen the extent of what they can do and how it can change the landscape of warfare. But you guys saw, or you got word of somebody placing something in it, and this one guy goes over the side of the road by himself, and to me, that he doesn't have a minesweeper. No. He's just walking over there to look and kind of poke around. Like, to me, that is way more stressful and in a way dire than like getting into a firefight.
Yeah, it was super tense, and the weather was going to shit at that time. I mean, the wind was picking up in a severe way. It was starting to kind of spit rain a little bit. It wasn't a down, but it was just like you're spitting rain a little bit, and it almost felt like a movie where it's like, okay, when the bad guy comes in, the sky goes dark, and like it felt like that, you know. And maybe the weather added to the tenseness, but it was like, hey, dude's like going over there to poke around someplace that somebody was digging in the road, and this is a place that like we're literally a quarter mile away from where they dropped the Moab. Like the reason they dropped that Moab is because this place was so infested with ISIS that they couldn't drive up into this valley where they were at without just getting slaughtered. They attempted it a few different times. It was impossible. That's why they had to drop the Moab. I took a picture where they dropped it. Like
that's incredible. So how long after after the Moab was dropped?
I was there 8 months afterwards, I want to say, give or take.
So not that long.
Because that Moab was dropped right after Trump was elected, like the week after. So no, it would have been like a year and a half afterwards.
Yeah, it was pretty soon though. But still.
Yeah, but this is where that happened. This is the whole reason Caught Blackfish is there, is because they were able to push up to that point because of the Moab.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
super interesting.
Yeah.
So the Moab, Caught Blackfish, where you were at, is a direct result of the Moab that was dropped, and then digging deeper. So basically pushing closer towards the heart of where they are,
trying to push ISIS up into the mountains into Pakistan.
Yeah,
that was the plan. And so that being said, how that ties into like this IED scene in the video is like, they constantly still take fire. They're doing terrain denial missions day and night because they're still coming up onto the ridgelines to fire down into the camp and, you know, do whatever they're doing. And so you go over there and it's like, it's not just some, you know, blown out of proportion threat that there might be an IED that was buried here. It's a very real threat. And there's just a couple of me and, you know, the two other guys that went out there. And one of them is over there poking around near it. And it's like, okay, like, shit's about to go down if like this thing blows.
It's like the equivalent of waiting for a car wreck to happen on the highway. Yeah. It's like, oh, like I think back about like,
and I'm sitting here thinking, going through my head, and thank God this didn't come to fruition, by the way. Like, but like I got my camera trained on him in the area because I'm like, fuck, if something blows up. And then I'm sitting here thinking like, well, what am I going to do with that then? Am I going to be the guy that's putting out a video of a dude getting smoked? You know, like what?
Yeah, your layer of the amount of decisions you need to make after something like that happens goes through the roof.
Yeah.
And not only, you know, mentally, how you feel about the story in general completely changes.
Yep.
Off one thing like that.
Yep. And there's it was even the thing like, you know, during the firefight, the Afghans, they got one of their guys killed and a couple of them hurt. And that warlord that we talked with, like, he was torn up about it when we went back down. And because of their background, they didn't know when we were coming back on the mountain to meet them, like, they didn't know if we were about to get, like, they were going to be pissed off and try to, like, turn their rifles on us. So going up to meet them, it was, like, kind of tense. And everybody kind of was at the ready. Like, it was, fortunately, didn't turn out that way, but it was even, like, you know, the guys were like, hey, keep the camera down, like, you know, don't. And that's why you'll see, like, the shots that I got, they're all very much of me just, like, it's down by my waist. The guy's kind of coming in and out of focus. You're just seeing guys at hip level because I'm trying to film in a very inconspicuous way because we don't know how things are going to go. And this guy's upset. Like, he's bawling his eyes out. You know, his boys are unhappy about the way this all went down.
So we're going to take a break and pick this up in part 2 of the Launch Code episode with Marty Skovlund Jr.